Sailor Direct's Doctor Who and things is taken from an interview I did recently for the Roadhouse podcasts. If you know about Doctor Who, Blake Seven, Howard's Way, or Warship, then this is for you, I hope.
Hello, I've got a man with me, wonderful man, who directed no less than 6 Doctor Who stories, which is quite a lot, in the 70s. And I'll tell you what they are now, and I'm sure you're all familiar with them. First of all, Colony in Space, The Sea Devils, The Green Death, Death to the Daleks, all starring Jon Pertwee as the Doctor, and Revenge of the Cybermen and the Robots of Death starring Tom Baker. And we'll be talking a lot about that and probably touching upon Blake Seven as well, because my guest also directed several of those. I found him through unusual means, that he's a circumnavigator on the ocean waves, and this is kind of like what he does now. So we'll be obviously discussing that too. So I'd like to welcome, please, Michael Lee Bryant. How are you, Michael?
Hi, good morning, Frank. Yeah, I'm really good. Sweating slightly under the Caribbean sun here in my cabin instead of on deck.
I'm not one bit jealous, Michael. No. A complete contrast here in Blighty, mate. It's 7 degrees Celsius and rain at the moment.
Yeah, that's what my relatives tell me.
Yeah.
No, it's lovely here, except it might rain. It does rain because it's the tropics. But there you go, tropical rainstorms.
But what a contrast. Yeah. But I'm glad you're having a lovely time. That's great. So, Michael, let's get on to Doctor Who, please, because there is quite a lot to talk about, I guess. How did you first find cutting your teeth on your first directing job on Doctor Who?
Well, it was really quite a frightening experience, quite a challenging experience.
Don't believe it. It's bigger inside than out.
Yes. That's because the TARDIS is dimensionally transcendental.
What does that mean?
It means that it's bigger inside than out.
So I think I was about 25 years old, 26 years old. I'd done a few things like Z-Cars and The Newcomers, and basically what in those days were soaps. They were bi-weeklies or weekly serials. So I directed episodes of those, but to be given a 6-part Colony in Space, 6-part story with a week's location filming, 10 days location filming, and an entire show to create, if you like, because one of the magical things in those days for a director doing Doctor Who was that it was your entire project. I mean, you controlled the design, you controlled makeup, wardrobe, you did, with the exception of the Doctor and his 1 or 2 companions, you cast the entire thing yourself. So it was a bit like being given 2 feature films to make at the same time in 6 weeks prep and get on with it. So yeah, it was a bit intimidating. Wonderful challenge, but nonetheless intimidating.
It turns out that you filmed in one of probably the most overused locations in the quarry. In that one, I believe.
It's the neighbour's boat's dog barking. I don't know if you can hear. Sorry, say it again, Frank.
And I was saying, you filmed in one of what turned out to be one of the most overused locations in Doctor Who, a quarry.
Yeah, but it was,
I believe,
it was a quarry that hadn't been used before on Doctor Who, and I'm not sure if, other than another episode of mine, maybe that was Blake Seven, I can't remember. I don't think it's been used since. And now I recently did a film thing for Blu-rays about it, and it's stopped being a quarry and it's now full of water and in the process of becoming a housing estate, which is both a very good thing and a bad thing, a sad thing for Doctor Who. It was down in Cornwall. It was a china clay quarry. It had lakes that are wonderful colours. Anything but sort of just blue. There were purple lakes caused by the chemicals in the sands and things. And it had a wonderful selection of roads and planet landscapes. So I think it was probably one of the period, of the time, and not being able to go to Tenerife like more recent Doctor Who's, it was probably one of the best quarry locations in the Who spectre.
Yeah. Of the many quarries, yeah, there's quite a few. Yeah, they used, yeah, over the years. Yeah, they did a few in Dorset, I believe, as well. In the latter series, they filmed there a few times in
Yeah.
these big dunes, big sand dunes in Dorset somewhere. I'm not sure where, but uh, yeah,
Yes, I think there are China, Cornwall. Well, certainly Cornwall and Devon was into exporting the sand that made China clay. They were China clay quarries, and that was the sand that produced glossy magazines, the gloss on glossy magazines.
ah,
So it used to be great shiploads of it used to be shipped away to make women's magazines or people's magazines or maybe even Playboy. I don't know. But of course, nobody reads magazines anymore, I suspect.
no, not really. Sadly, not. No, it's all online now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Getting onto this one, Michael, the Sea Devils, which was quite a classic. You know, that's another six-parter you did again. Um,
Yeah.
Was that filmed, I believe, in parts? Is it Dungeness? Am I right in saying? Was it
No, Sea
Dungeness?
Devils. Sea Devils. I've used a bit of Dungeness in one of my YouTube films. No, Sea Devils was all shot in Portsmouth area.
Ah,
Basically, Barry Letts, the producer, had done a deal with the Royal Navy to use the Fraser, the gunnery school, which is based near Portsmouth, and the Sea Devils needed I think it was really meant to be an oil rig originally, but we ended up using one of the forts in the channel into Portsmouth Harbour as the main sort of operating base for the Sea Devils to come out from. And so no, it was all filmed. It was all filmed around Portsmouth, and an absolute joy to do. Working with the Navy, the Royal Navy, is always a pleasure. Many years later, I did a show called Warship, and that was with the Navy as well. And I actually filmed. I needed to do a battleship, a frigate, going through an Arctic zone in ice fields. So we couldn't actually go there to do it. So I actually covered the top of the Doctor Who fort in foam and looked down over that with the frigate running a few hundred meters away from the fort, with actually the South Sea in the background, but it looks like an iceberg.
yeah.
Probably is an iceberg today.
That story, the Sea Devils, it was very busy. I mean, there was a lot of action in it. I mean, you had the Navy there. You had a helicopter, I believe. You had a you had a diving bell construction thing, a hovercraft. Yeah, so many things.
No, the helicopter was actually just a piece of stock footage, but the diving bell. I mean, the Navy gave us HMS Reclaim, which is I guess, a submarine recovery vessel, which has a diving bell, and they gave it to us for a day's filming. Absolutely amazing, along with the hovercraft.
Yeah.
Along with Bofors guns firing endless shells, along with the service personnel of HMS Reclaim saluting the master in his commander's uniform and
Yes. Yeah.
and participating, running around with their rifles. And isn't that awful? I'm not sure what weapons the Royal Navy used in those days, but they were certainly good automatic weapons, and they fired blanks, which would otherwise have cost me £1 a round and have to be limited.
Oh wow. What a budget.
No, it's a really good action story.
It was.
I think. Yeah.
It really was. I found those cars really odd. You know, the cars that the security guys were going around with no doors on them and stuff.
The
That was something odd
Dianes,
there.
yes.
Yeah.
I was quite keen to make the prison that the master's been incarcerated in a little bit different. I mean, I didn't want sort of Pentonville or whatever, which is not to say I didn't approach the prison on the Isle of Wight, whose name escapes me, as a location, but we ended up using Carisbrooke Castle, which is not that far away and worked very well indeed. I wanted to make the prison a little bit different. So I did things like, okay, the prison guards all had a sort of paramilitary uniform. They needed to ride around in vehicles for various story reasons. So I didn't want them using Jeeps or Land Rovers. I wanted something different. And I confess, I was an enormous fan of The Prisoner. And in The Prisoner, I'm pretty sure they used something similar. Basically, I was going to use two CVs with the doors taken off, French cars, but in fact, two CVs, they weren't available. It was difficult to get hold of to hire, so we ended up with Dianes. And I just took the doors off the Dianes and made them run around with the doors off. And I thought they looked terrific. I thought they looked different. If you notice something, all the guards in that story have a moustache. Not many people know that. In fact, you're the first person to ask about it. It was just my way of trying to make the prison special and different and a unique prison for the master to be incarcerated in.
It was good. I mean, the location was great. The exterior of that fort, of that place with the prison was really, really good.
Carisbrooke Castle was actually, it's not really a castle, it's a chateau, but it was actually the place where Queen Victoria used to go on holiday when she was a girl. When she was a child, she used to go there on the Isle of Wight. And when she became older and a queen, she wanted to buy it, and the people who owned it didn't want to sell it to her. So she went off and built, and the name escapes me, her palace on the Isle of Wight. The name will come back in a minute, and set up a home there. But that was because she adored Carisbrooke so much as a child.
It was a stunning place, stunning location. Yeah. It worked so well in the story. Location. It really was effective. Yeah.
Yeah. Looking out over the sea as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The other thing I heard, I'd seen rather over the years, was a couple of interviews with Jon Pertwee, and he was talking about that story. And one thing he said, he spoke about Roger Delgado as the master.
Yeah.
And I just wondered what your memories of this was. He mentioned that he said that Delgado as a person was very, very, quite a scaredy cat in many ways with certain things, even though he played a menacing character. And he said that when you were doing the scenes in the water and Roger had to go in the water, apparently he's terrified of water. Did you know that at the time?
Oh, absolutely. And I knew that at the time, or at least I was told that at the time. I mean, Roger couldn't swim. So if you can't swim, that's a pretty good reason to be nervous about going in the water. And he was scared of the water in the way that some people are scared of flying. I mean, it doesn't seem... Roger was just scared of the water. He was scared of being immersed in the water. So there was a speedboat chase. Roger hated boats. I mean, if you're scared of the water, of course you're not going to want to get on a little speedboat and drive it around over the sea with John chasing you. He loves the water. So yeah, Roger was very brave. He did enough with the speedboat chase to make it work, and a stunt double did all the driving and most of the stuff for him. But there was a sequence where Roger and John were supposed to come up from the Sea Devil's home in escape suits, in Royal Navy submarine escape suits, and bob onto the surface and be rescued by a Royal Navy hovercraft. And Roger did that. I mean, Roger, being brave is not, if you're brave, it doesn't really mean anything. It just means you're not scared. And if you're not scared, it probably, when everybody else around you is panicking, it probably means you just don't know what the hell's going on. You're stupid. Being scared is a very, very real emotion. And despite being scared, Roger got into this immersion suit, got onto this little hovercraft, came out into the Solent, and got himself in the sea and floated around in the sea, unable to swim, with John in the water beside him. But I mean, very brave man, Roger. Very, very brave man.
Yes, I remember that scene very well. You can clearly see it's Roger lying on his back in that suit. He's clearly there.
That's right.
In some of the shots, he's definitely there. Yeah.
Yes. Oh no, in the suit. In the suit. That is all Roger.
That's all him. Yeah.
All Roger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just for a moment, Michael, just as we're talking about Roger, can you tell us some memories of working with him? What he was like as a person? What sort of comes to mind?
He was a lovely man. I mean, he was a consummate actor. I mean, he knew, he was an actor's actor. He was a director's actor. There's a sword fight sequence in there, and both he and John at drama school, have been taught to fence, have been taught to do sword fighting, which he did brilliantly. Roger had the ability to underplay. Roger had the ability to underplay. Roger had the ability to, he could do less, and that was more. So, yeah. It was, oh, yeah. Sorry, hold on one sec.
That's all right.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. I apologize.
Oh no, that's these things happen. It's life on the ocean wave. You see, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. Yeah. So you were speaking about Roger there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what Roger brought to the master was he brought the skill of underplaying it. I mean, he never shouted, he never screamed, and to see the master give a little smile was much more frightening to see than seeing him snarl. So yeah, Roger, and also Roger and John were enormously good friends. They were great mates. They spent a lot of they enjoyed each other's company, and socially they spent a lot of time together. So it really was a feel-good feeling having Roger, when you were doing a show where Roger was in the production.
Yeah. You went on to do The Green Death next,
yes.
Which is another one that's hailed by the fans as a classic. Set in Wales for the most part. Certainly, the exterior stuff. A lot of the exterior stuff was in Wales, I believe. And a mining, the miners at the time, in Wales, and then the famous or the infamous giant maggots and stuff like that. And people mostly call the story the one with the maggots, as they remember it. That's the shorthand one. Oh yeah, when you were a kid, I remember the one with the maggots. Yeah, And this was actually Katy Manning's farewell story. She left in this one. So, what was that like shooting that, Michael? That farewell scene, was it very emotional because she'd been with John for about 3 years or so, and they were a big family, working on the show.
Yeah, I was. I mean, there is a difference between reality, what you see in the screen, where there's the party, there's the hippie party, and she says goodbye to the doctor, never to see him again, and goes off with her boyfriend, and that's recorded on a piece of videotape and is the story. And there is the other reality that we finished recording that evening, and we all went to a party, and even after the show, we all met up. So it wasn't like Katy really, really went away. I mean, she was around in all our lives, for some time after that, and indeed still today. God bless her. I was never sure how much. Barry was very concerned that it would all get over emotional and we'd never get the last scene recorded. I looked at the pair of them, John and Katy, and went, how much are you winding me up? Just how much of this is a wind up? And I was working with Katy a few weeks ago, and I actually said to her, how much of that was a wind up? And she said, none of it, Michael. It was absolutely true. We were all very, very emotional. And I went, yeah, great, okay. So I believed that about as much as I believed it at the time. Yes, it was emotional. Yes, it was sad. Yes, the last rehearsals for the last episode. So you've got 6 days, 6 days of rehearsals in which you are rehearsing for Katy and John the very last time that they would be together in the rehearsal room. So yes, there was emotional, but I mean, it wasn't, they're professionals, they're doing their job. They're not going to, well, it was emotional. Yes, it was. Yes, there was a sadness that she was leaving, but they were professionals and it was all under control all of the time.
Yeah.
Or most of the time, anyway.
Yeah, it later transpired that she was in a relationship with the character Cliff Jones in it. Yeah, that kind of.
Oh yeah, no, we knew
Yeah,
about that from the beginning. I mean,
that developed.
when I
Yeah,
was casting the show and I was casting that character, Katie messaged me and said, "Will you see my boyfriend for the part?" And sort of as a matter of principle, I went, "Well, actually, no." I had a whole list of people that I was seeing, and I wasn't sure that it was a good idea to have somebody's boyfriend in the show, playing the leading role opposite her. I thought it probably wasn't a good idea at all. So I continued to interview various actors for the part, and I just really couldn't find anybody that I thought was right at all. And then Katie's agent actually got on to me and said, "Michael, listen, I know all your misgivings over Katie pushing it, but you really do need to meet Stuart Bevan. He's a very good actor, and I think that just give him 5 minutes of your time, and I think you'll think it's worthwhile." So I went, "Oh yeah, okay." So a date was made for him to come to my office for an interview. Knocked on the door. He came in, and he walked in looking the business. Of course he'd read the script. I mean, Katie had shown him the script. So he'd read the script, he knew what the character was, he knew exactly what it was like. He bowled in with the hippie clothes, carrying a guitar, and talking with a slight Welsh accent. And he sat down and he read for me, and I mean, he was absolutely perfect. And I just cast him. I mean, he was absolutely perfect for the job. He was the right actor for that job.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with Katie, nothing to do with his agent. He was just right. So he and Katie were in a relationship, and that was fine because they were acting, slightly less acting required. I mean, they were in a relationship, in a developing relationship in the story. So yeah, no, it was all good news. And there's a very nice Blu-ray film about, I think it's on Blu-ray, of Stuart and Katie going back to Derry, I think the place was called,
Yes.
the mining town, going back there and seeing some of the inhabitants again. And it was lovely to see them together again. Absolutely lovely.
I didn't talk about the unit team. I must mention those and how you found working with Nick Courtney, Richard Franklin, and John Levine.
Well, I was really lucky in as much as all my shows were basically not unit shows. I mean, the only input unit had in Green Death was, I think, at the very, very beginning, there was a bit with Richard Franklin, and in the very last episode on the slag heaps unit were meant to be there.
Yeah.
A lot of that actually. I'd had so many troubles with maggots and flying insects and jet planes that were meant to bomb the slag heap and then couldn't because they've got other things to do, that I overran slightly and ended up shooting some of the close-ups in the studio against blue screen, against CSO.
Yes. Yeah.
Which sort of, it was the only solution really. How did I get on well? I mean, absolutely fine. I just didn't have that much to do with them. And also, I confess, I didn't always watch every single episode of Doctor Who back in those days. So I didn't really understand how important UNIT had become to the stories. And basically, UNIT had become important to the stories because they were cheap. They meant the stories were happening in modern day Britain with no exotic locations and
Yes.
few exotic costumes. So I was really lucky to get shows that had a better budget, and that's
Indeed.
UNIT.
Yeah, many of your stories.
They were good. I mean, John, John Levine, I think, is still around, was played one of the characters, and Richard Franklin played the lieutenant, and remind me,
Nicholas Courtney.
Nicholas
the
Courtney,
brigadier. Yeah.
all of whom, Nick, yeah, great actors, lovely to work with, lovely.
Yeah. Then, of course, following on from that, there was a bit of a shake-up, a bit of a change. Katie's left, and in comes Elizabeth Sladen
Yes,
for Death to the Daleks story.
yes,
So, in fact, you've got two stories back to back where you've got two very classic monsters,
yeah.
to work with. Daleks and Cybermen are always recurring characters. How was that working with the Daleks for the first time? Was there many sort of problems with working with them? I mean, in terms of where they moved and things like that.
Working for the first time. Don't forget, I'd worked as an ASM and a PA on Doctor Who years past, so I'd been in the rehearsal room in the studio with Daleks, so I knew how it worked. I knew how they operated. I knew what they were capable of. And because I knew what they were capable of, when I saw these sand dunes, which I've got a feeling was that China clay quarry, I think Death to the Daleks, I think we shot in the same quarry as Colony in Space.
Right.
Not certain, but it might have been. Daleks do not move well in the sand. In fact, Daleks do not move on the sand. And the only way you can make Daleks move on the sand is by putting them on, I don't know, a piece of 12x6 blockboard or something. So I had scenes where the Daleks had to be moving around considerably. And I thought a way of doing it would be to put them on wheels on railway lines. So Elimac dollies, which are a film industry dolly, a fairly lightweight film industry dolly that runs on little railway lines, it was possible to take the wheels off, or take the base off an Elimac dolly and put it underneath a Dalek, and then put the wheels onto the track, the railway lines, the track. So we hired just about all the Elimac dolly track that was available in the United Kingdom at that time, and painted it sand-coloured and laid it out where required in the quarry, with the Daleks running down. The only problem with that was that the operators couldn't get their feet past the Elimac dolly track.
Oh yes, yeah.
Wheels in order to get to the ground, so they couldn't actually move themselves. So they had to be pulled by nylon wires, or they had to have. There was a scene with John and John Abineri and various others walking along with 4 or 5 Daleks. So each actor had his own Dalek, and the track was sloping slightly downwards. So each actor gave the Dalek a little push downwards and then walked off beside it, doing their dialogue. The trouble on the first take was that John pushed his first Dalek far too enthusiastically, and the Dalek set off down the track, accelerating away, with the operator inside going, oh, I can't stop, until it ran to the end of the track, fell off and fell over. So we tried again with slightly less enthusiasm in the pushing.
I wonder, I actually forgot something I wanted to ask you earlier on about the Sea Devils. In your choice of shots, this was, Michael, that really fascinated me. There was a couple that stood out. One in particular was the scene where I think John first encounters the Sea Devil on the oil rig base, or wherever, the thing,
Yes.
and gives chase, and you see this wonderful lighting, shadow and lights on this kind of gantry, but you've got the camera tilted sort of at an angle, and the Sea Devil's in shadow running across it. That was very, very effective. That I really like that.
Yeah, I think it was worth the effort. It was actually, today you could do it in a blink. in those days, you've got this huge, great camera. I mean, it's it's a
Yeah.
meter and a bit long with lens turrets on it, and it takes two men to lift it. So in order to get that tilt, you had to take it off its pan, take the camera off the pan tilt head, the studio pan tilt head, insert a wedge on the pan tilt head,
Yeah.
and then put the camera onto the wedge so that it was tilted, and that of course and that took 7 or 8 minutes. And in a recording period, that's actually quite an important amount of time. It is, and then you've got to take it off again.
Yeah.
But I thought, tunnels. We're always doing tunnels, always doing that. And the trick is, I think, with stuff like that, is not to be able to see the monster too clearly. I mean, once you reveal the monster in its total glory, it ceases to have the effect that when it is in shadow or not seen clearly. Something nasty in the woodshed is much better than seeing something nasty.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Yes, it's what you don't see often. There's more.
But
More
yeah,
fun.
I mean, I worked quite hard. I worked quite hard, but we had a day studio with that set, and so like the spiral staircase also required the camera to point pretty well directly, required a wedge as well, because it required the camera to point directly up at a mirror which had been hung in the lighting grid, looking down on the top of the spiral staircase. Yeah, I did all the spiral staircases shots just one after another. I mean, I did Declan and people going up the spiral staircase, down there, and Katie and John. So I did all the spiral staircases shots just one after another, just as you would in a feature film. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing original.
Well, it saves money as well. You've got the thing set.
Filming.
Otherwise, you'd be
Just did it
dismantling doing it
once.
again.
That's right. Yeah.
And it would be eating into the precious time that you've got, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suspect, having got the camera on the wedge, I then did the corridor shots with the camera tilted over, which is the same thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to mention that. I just thought, because that was I liked that style that you used. It was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that stops you doing more of that is the time it takes to. Today, with the size of cameras, it's no time at all. Back in those days, it was, two blokes and a lot of heaving and near hernias. Yeah.
Yes, but they were really cumbersome, those cameras. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Then we're going through changes all the time here. We've had companions go, and now we've had a new Doctor come in. With Revenge of the Cybermen. Again, you're working with the heavyweight monsters in it. Now, again, the second most popular after the Daleks, really. I think I might be wrong, Michael, but I think this might have been Tom's first story, because they shot the productions out of sequence, didn't they?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So this would have been his first story that he actually filmed.
Yes, it was. I mean, Tom was brilliant. I mean, Tom was absolutely determined to make the new Doctor his Doctor. He didn't want to be a reincarnation of John. He didn't want to be a reincarnation of any other Doctor. He wanted to have his own original Doctor. And of course, the problem at that stage was the scripts were written by writers who'd only ever seen John Pertwee playing the part. So the scripts were basically written for John Pertwee's concept of how the Doctor was. So Tom worked hard at taking me out to lunch, taking me to the cinema to see his Sinbad film, and getting to know me so that he could say to me on location, look, Michael, this scene that calls for all this violence, this scene that calls for all this and that, isn't really, I don't think it's very witty or very clever. I don't think it's the way I would like to do it. To which I would say, okay, Tom, what is it you think you could do instead? And he would tell me, and I would go, yeah, sure, fine. I can do something like that. Let's do something like that.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to work with an actor taking over a role and making it his own. And because I trusted Tom implicitly, I was very happy to try to accommodate the way he saw things happening for his character in certain scenes.
You shot some of that, the cave sequences down in Wookiee Hole, didn't you?
Yes,
In
that was
is it
Wookiee Hole,
Somerset, I believe. Yeah.
yeah.
Was that quite difficult to do, to get, you know, to get all the team down there, the gear down there, and shooting it kind of like
Um,
confined there, you know,
no,
environment?
no, it actually wasn't. I mean, I think we shot. I've got a feeling that we shot at a time when Madame Tussauds, who owned Wookiee Hole, weren't having parties around visiting.
Yeah.
The access to the place was very good. I mean, there was a car park there. There was, space for, makeup wagons, costume wagons, honey wagons. The entrance into the cave system was concrete flooring, so it made it very easy to get the equipment into the early parts of the cave. It was partly lit. Well, I mean, it was lit for the tours. So it meant that when you went in there, you weren't fumbling around in the darkness. You could see where you were, you could see what you were doing. And then the lighting cameraman, Elmer Cozzi, I think it was, Elmer could then use the minimum amount of light to make the place look interesting and exciting and deep and dark and so on. So no, it was actually a really good cave location with lots and lots of different facets to it. Lots of different facets to it.
Yeah. I believe that there was an incident that while you were shooting down there, did with Elizabeth Sladen. Did she almost have an accident there?
Yes, there was. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, she did.
Yeah.
I decided to use what the speedboat. There's a little lake. Well, there's a couple of lakes down there, and I decided to use the same speedboat as we'd used in the Sea Devils,
Yeah.
because I knew they were easy to work. I knew how they were.
Yeah.
I knew the operator. I knew the people who'd lend us one, and so in part of a chase sequence with Liz, I decided to have there's engine already running, a speedboat on one side of a lake so that she just had to get on it, push it off, open the throttle and go across the beach on the other side, jump out and get off. Not that big a deal, except that that particular lake was, I don't know, probably 100 feet deep and had a very strong current running through it, which went down. There was a rocky shelf that went down into the water. So whilst there was the lake, the current that ran through the lake ended up going underground into a shelf. And the water, of course, was icy cold. Now, before we shot this, we were shooting overlooking the lake with something called the Witch, there is a legend. It is a stalagmite. It's a big stand-up stalagmite, huge. It's like 3 meters across at the base, and it looks vaguely like a witch. And there is a legend that it is the Witch of Wookiee Hole, and it must be treated with respect. And that morning, I came down to the location to discover that various people had draped a black cloak around it, put a traffic cone on the head, put a lighting stand, feet, which looked a bit like a witch's whatever, in its hand, and they had dressed the witch up. And hey, I'm an atheist, but I went, hey guys, I'm not sure that's the best idea, but maybe I'd like to take you down. So various things went wrong that day for no apparent real reason. And Terry, the stuntman, had hurt himself doing something prior to doing, in all part of this chase sequence. So he was on standby. When Liz had to jump into the little power boat on the far side. We were filming on this side. She was driving the thing towards us. So I said action. She ran out of the little cave, jumped onto the speedboat, pushed it out, opened the throttle, and something happened. It bucked. The whole thing bucked, and she was thrown off into the water, into this freezing cold water with this powerful current running through it. And Terry, God bless him, despite being ill, ran down and dived into the lake, got hold of her and pulled her out of the water when she was only about, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet from where the rocky shelf came down into the water. And if she'd gone down there, she'd have drowned. If she'd have gone down underneath there, without a doubt, she'd have drowned. There was no question of it. And he pulled her to safety and recovered her, and I said cut, and we dried off Liz so that she could warmed her up so she could carry on filming. And Terry ended up going to hospital with hypothermia. So spent at least a day in hospital as a result of rescuing Liz. So despite my not believing in anything, I don't think you should mess around with legends in Orky Hole Cave.
Yeah. There was a story, I believe, as well, that of a ghost down there or something, of a man or something.
There's a story which is there's a story. As a director, I would go to every location for film locations, because you have to work really fast. So you have to know everything about the location, and you actually have to have a plan. You have to have a shooting script. Whether you abide by the shooting script come the day is something else, but you have to know everything about it. So I asked Wookey Hole if I could sit in various locations around the caves where I was going to film. And they're very extensive caves. And one of the places I wanted to sit was relatively close to where the general public would pass by on their concrete steps, on their concrete route for their tours. And Madame Tussauds said, yeah, look, we're not very happy with you just sitting around somewhere when the general public are going through. So we're very happy for you to do it in the evening when the caves are closed. So you can go in there at 7 o'clock. We'll have shut the caves off. We'll close the front entrance completely, and we'll take you in through a back entrance, which I didn't know existed. We'll take you in through a back entrance, and you can sit there for as long as you like. We'll leave the lights on, and when you're finished, just walk back to the back entrance, press on the bell there, and we'll let you out. Went along and sat down about 6:30 when it was 7 o'clock in the evening when they'd closed, and I was doing my script, and I was sitting there writing my shooting script. I'd been there about an hour when from the other direction, from not where the back entrance is, which was open, from the inner parts of the caves, a guy came along with a haversack, walking along, and I was quite startled, because I just didn't expect to see anybody. If I expected to see anybody, they were going to come from my right, where the back entrance was. That would be one of the Wookey Hole people coming to see me. But no, he came from there, and he'd got this haversack with. I'm a diver. I'm a scuba diver, so I carry my gear in the same sort of. In those days, I carry my gear in the same sort of bag. So I reckoned he was a scuba diver, or he looked like he got scuba gear with him. And he said hi, and I said hi. He said, I'm just going through to the lake. And there's a lake beyond the lake where I was, which leads deep underground. It's an underground dive that goes into the underwater parts of Wookey Hole, where none of us have been to. You can only get there with scuba gear. Carried on doing my work, and about an hour later, I finished up, and I wanted a beer, so I went back to the back entrance, pressed the bell for the guy to let me out, and I said, "Fine." I said, "Did you let the other guy out?" He said, "What other guy?" I said, "A guy about an hour ago, 3/4 an hour ago, a guy came through with a load of scuba bag and stuff, haversack with scuba." And he came out this way. He went, "He didn't." I said, "Yes, he did. It must be, it was 3/4 an hour ago." He said, No. He said, "Nobody's come out except you. I've been here the entire evening beside this entrance on duty, and nobody else has come out." And I said, well, it was a blue. He said, yeah. He said, that's interesting. He said, 6 or 9 months ago, a young diver died diving in the other parts. He got down there, he got stuck, he ran out of air, and we couldn't get him back. And there have been rumors that he's still around. And I went, oh, yeah, really? He said, well, I said, no. He went, well, yeah, I'm like you. I don't believe either, but yeah, that's the story. He said, interesting. Are you sure? I mean, of course I'm sure. I mean, didn't make it out. And I said, you're sure nobody came out? He went, sure. And the front's locked? He said, the front is bolted, padlocked. No way can anybody get in that way. So I said, fine, actually, I think I'm going back for a Scotch instead of a beer.
A double. Yeah. That's extraordinary though, isn't it? Things like that. That's
Yeah. I mean,
really,
I can,
yeah.
part of me can think up 1,000 reasonable explanations.
Yeah.
And part of me goes, well, that happened to me. And I must admit, certainly the bad luck element with Liz, I believe 100%. The diver, I've got no mind about it. I don't know. I think there are things in this world that we don't fully understand, and I think there are. I think it is possible to not be a believer, but believe that there was once a really good story 100 years ago about walls having memories.
Was that the? Are you thinking of the stone tape?
The stone tapes, yeah, the stone tapes.
Stone tape. Nigel
I
Neal,
remember it as being
a
a very good TV series. Yeah,
It was very
creepy. I'm
yeah.
sort of a little bit into.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the stone tapes idea, memories, can hang around in buildings.
Mm.
I'm aware of good vibes and bad vibes. So don't know.
We're getting on to your last Doctor Who story that you directed, Michael, called The Robots of Death, of course, with Tom, and a new companion again, Louise Jameson, as
yes,
Leela.
Lovely Louise.
Yes, she's great. And it was kind of based, I think, a lot of the Doctor Who's were kind of homages to to certain old films. I know there was ones that had Frankenstein element to it, and Jekyll and Hyde and Forbidden Planet and various things like that.
The Crusade,
And the Robots of Death, I think, was based loosely on an Agatha Christie whodunit kind of thing. I think. I know that has been mentioned before.
I'm not. That could be right. I don't know. You'd have to ask Chris Boucher. Well, Chris Boucher. Robots of Death script happened because the series had run out of money. So one way to save money is not to have any location filming and do it all in the studio.
Yeah.
And to only have one set or group of sets, because scenery costs money. Scenery costs a lot of money. You have no location filming except for half a day on the stage at Ealing, which is where you just bowl up and you have a film cameraman. It costs nothing. And I don't think any of the actors were in that location filming. No, they weren't at all. So Chris was commissioned. He was a story editor. He was commissioned to write a very cheap 4-part story to recover the budget for the season. So he decided to write a Doctor Who type, Agatha Christie type, whodunit story with robots in it. So that was how the script originated.
Yeah. But I must admit, the design of the robots was beautiful. The mask thing, I thought was a wonderful design.
Yeah. They're good scripts. Chris was a very good writer. The scripts were absolutely fine, but it was all sort of a bit iRobot, and the people in the Space Miner were Space 1999, white, good looking.
Yeah.
attractive space people. I mean, it was so full of, in my opinion, space cliches, which is fair enough,
Yeah.
that I just went, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Cousin, who was a first officer in the Merchant Navy, I'd been on his ship in Tilbury only a few weeks before to discover the interior of this rather scruffy-looking merchant ship was absolutely lovely. I mean, it was beautiful. Oak paneling, nice pictures on the walls, bars, gyms, carpet on the floor. I mean, the shipping companies do their very, very best to make the crew accommodation on ships as comfortable and nice as possible, because the guys are going to be there for 3 months. Now, if you're going to go on a space miner for 3 years, you can take that to another level. So I said to Ken, I've got an idea that we don't have to have Space 1999. We don't have to have all this. We don't have to have all these sort of shiny panels and everything else. We can make the interior of this space miner really nice and comfortable, like a merchant ship would be. And if you're doing that, I reckon you could have it in any design style that the crew wanted. And I am desperate one day to own a house that is designed around a Roman bath, to have a swimming pool with pillars all around the swimming pools and little rooms off it and that. Instead of wearing Space 1999 costumes, they could all wear togas and kilts and, gladiators. It would look really great, because why would you need to wear some sort of special uniform when you're all on duty? Have you ever heard of Art Deco? And I went, I've been to Miami and I've seen Art Deco. He said, do you really know what it's like? I said, well, quite frankly, no. He said, when we're back in the office, I'll bring you some books over tomorrow, he said, but I think we could do the set as Art Deco. So anyway, he bowled in to my office the next morning with half a dozen illustrations, and I looked at all this art. I went, wonderful. Let's design the set Art Deco. Let's have interior in Art Deco. That's wonderful. And I said, then the robots should be Art Deco robots. They should be in exactly the same style. They should. Yeah. And in fact, the guys there, we're not going to have white people in it. We're not going to have an all-white cast, which is what was written. And today, really, it was an enactment of what's going on today. I said, I will cast a multi-ethnic group of characters for the show. I won't cast white English people for it. I'll cast colored people. I'll cast Indian people. I'll cast multi-ethnically for the show. And why don't they all wear makeup? Why don't? Because at that time, at that period, men wearing makeup had started to be fashionable with, and I'm struggling for the name, isn't that awful?
The glam rock music scene in that
the glam rock music,
that kind of thing
was all happening. Yeah. So I went, so I went, fine. And I went, I'm not a designer. Kenan is a designer. He's come up with this idea. He knows all about it. So I said to head of costume and head of makeup, what we're going to do, we had a meeting. What we're going to do is we're going to do it all Art Deco. Makeup's going to be out, everything. It's going to be out there. And I want you to filter, instead of coming to me with your ideas, I want you to filter it through Ken so that there is one uniform, visually creative style in the entire production. So, I really want makeup to report to Ken. And that's not to say that they didn't in the end consult me, and I didn't get a say, but Ken actually was able to control the design of the entire production and make it into what it is. And then one of the things you're not allowed to do as a director at that time, or even now I suspect at the BBC, is change the script. You're not allowed to alter the dialogue. So now I've got these Art Deco robots, I've got all this. So I've got these robots saying horrible things. So I made the masks. I had the masks made with the possibility of putting microphones in them so that I could have actors speaking live with their actions when they were interacting with human beings. So I decided that every robot would be absolutely charming. Whatever he did, whatever he said, he would be like he was selling you soap powder, and he'd do it with a smile and a nice tone in his voice, and I'm going to cut your heart out and then have you hanged, drawn and quartered, because that was such fun. So I developed with the actors the idea that of the movement and their voices. And when we had a few extras being robots, they then copied the way that the actors walked and everything else.
It was a wonderful story, Michael. You know,
Mhm.
I did. It was one of my favorite stories. I did really enjoy Robots of Death.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. Um, you did also. I haven't got the titles here, and I'm a bit vague with Blake Seven. I wasn't a huge follower of it, but I know people that may watch this might be. But you did direct several episodes of that. Um, at the time. How was that working? I mean, because Doctor Who was still running at the same time, and was there any parallels to it? Do you think in the style or the?
well, David Maloney, the producer of Blake Seven, basically wanted directors who had directed Doctor Who because you know how to do all the effects, you know how to do the action, you know how to do the visual effects, you know how to do the stunts and so on, and all that was a very important part of Blake Seven. When he came to me, I directed episode 1, and I think 4, and a couple more. Um, he came to me, and I really didn't want to do it. I'd finished with Doctor Who. I'd felt I'd contributed everything I had to contribute to Doctor Who, and I wanted to move on to other things. And I thought coming to do Blake Seven would be a retrograde step for me personally. But David took me to dinner and gave me Terry Nation's episode 1 script. And if you've ever seen Blake Seven, episode 1 is totally different, I think, from all the other episodes. It has a different style, a different sort of script, everything else. And I was immensely impressed by the script and went, well, yeah, if it's going to be like this, yeah, I'll do it. Thank you. So it was different. It was very different in as much as it was meant to be. It was meant to be communal acting. It was meant to be ensemble acting. It had it had Blake and 6 or 7 other characters that were meant to be present the whole time. So that was a difference. And it was, if you look at episode 1, it's a very adult script. It is not the sort of thing you would put out at tea time on a Sunday. So,
Oh no.
um, in the experience of working on Blake Seven was a good experience and really interesting because David Pennant, who was the other action director, if you like, who started at the beginning, and I, the 3 of us, really sat down together at the beginning and we discussed how the series was going to work. We did the casting between Gareth Thomas, the lead, had been cast almost immediately by David, but all the other characters were a sort of produce of the 3 of us talking about it and how we were going to approach the show. And it was interesting. I mean, I didn't agree about some aspects of the way the ship was going to be used and so on. I had a different idea. My idea was the computers would run the whole shooting match, and the early scripts weren't like that, but later scripts converted to computers running the whole shooting match. I didn't like the idea of actors driving a ship like Space 1999. I mean, come on, people hardly drive an F-16, do they, or an F-17? I mean, they press a button and off it goes. So yeah, it was a really interesting experience, and it was different from doing Doctor Who. Yes, it was different.
Now, getting on to something that's completely different to your directing work, and this is how I found you, by the way, Michael, as you know. You are now a circumnavigator, and you're going all around the world and stuff like that. It sounds great, and you're currently, talking to me in your boat. And I have to ask you, how did this shift in life or passion for something different come about? How long have you been doing this now?
I've always been, my first love has always been filmmaking. I mean, when I was 13 years old, I had a Palliot Bolex 8mm film camera, and I was busy making little films. So make no mistake about it, making movies has always been, telling stories visually has always been my first and great love. So I'm one of the very few lucky people in this world who's I was able to earn my living doing something which I absolutely adored doing. I never could wait for Monday mornings. I just used to look forward to going to work like there was no tomorrow. I just loved the whole process of making films, making little drama productions, making stories. And my second sort of hobby has always been boats. I had canoes on the River Thames. My mum taught me to sail in a sailing dinghy. And I messed around. I've messed around at weekends with boats all my life. When I became a director, I started earning just about enough money to buy a very, very second-hand sailboat and keep it on the River Hamble, which I was lucky to have. And directing in those days, and I'm sure it's true today, was pretty stressful. I mean, one year that I was a director, 7 of my colleagues died of heart attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, and that I'm pretty sure was the stress of being a teledirector. It's a stressful job.
Yeah.
And what I found with sailing boats was that, I'm not saying it isn't stressful, it is stressful in a sailing boat, but there's nothing you can do about it. If you're a director, your job is, when there are problems, is to solve the problem and get the show on the road. Now, solve the problem now and get going with how you work this filming problem out. In a boat, if there's no wind, there's no wind. If the wind's going in the wrong direction, it's going in the wrong direction. You have to be philosophical about it. That is not to say that you don't take some action. It's not to say you don't do things. But you know, I've actually sat here in the Caribbean for the last 3 weeks, waiting for the weather to turn so I can get out of this marina and go sailing to a few other islands. And it's the ability to be patient for 3 weeks that makes you into a good sailor, I think. And I reckon it was messing about with boats at weekends. I would get in my car on Friday night, drive down to my boat on the Hamble, get in a rubber dinghy, put the outboard on the back, motor for half an hour up the river, tie the dinghy up, get on board, you know, and then the next morning I'd sail off somewhere, then I'd come back on Sunday. That is just so different from being a teledirector that I think it makes you better able to cope with the stress. It also gave me the idea for creating the basic story outline for Howard's Way. Which I created the original outline from, and Jerry Glaister, God bless him, took it and turned it into something else and turned it into a very successful series. Mine was called The Boatyard, and it got converted into Howard's Way, which I later directed as well. So there are some advantages in knowing about boats. When I was doing a show called Warship, because I could sail, because I knew about boats, it gave me a tremendous advantage in directing those episodes. When I directed Treasure Island, that gave me a huge advantage in knowing something about where the Caribbean is and how you get there and what goes on and what it was like in ships of those days. So the sailing has always frequently fed into my directing career, and philosophically it has, I think, made me better able to cope with stress.
Michael, you now have a YouTube channel called Sailing Gently.
Yes,
which I've been watching some videos of, and I'm very, very impressed with it. And you've got a very nice style of presenting, you know, it's relaxed and everything. And I was really drawn into it. You know, I've watched about 3 or 4 of them at the moment. And so how has that been for you? How has the channel been for you? How has it grown and so on? And what gave you the idea to do the channel?
when when I was doing my circumnavigation, I actually in Miami I purchased a little digital film camera, and I
Yeah.
proceeded to make films as I traveled from place to place, because ultimately sailing's boring. Ultimately, you sail somewhere, you get there, you drop the hook, and you go ashore, and you're a tourist, and you're looking at the places, and there's nothing to do. I mean, other than so. I started making films with that digital camera, and I sold those films on VHS and CD, mainly in America, actually, mainly to Americans. I mean, some in the UK, but I had an agent who sold the films for me, blah, blah, blah. And that was fine. That was great. But that was 20 years ago. That was 20 years ago. I
Wow.
mean,
Yeah.
I'm as old as I look. And when COVID came along, I had just bought this boat because I've moved to northern France, and I sold my boat in the Mediterranean because it was too big and various other reasons. And I bought this little boat and I had her there, and COVID came along, and I went, what do I do now for a laugh? And I write books. I've got a load of books about sailing. They're all about sailing, so they're not of any interest to people in Doctor Who. They're at gentlesailing.com, which I sell these books as downloads. And COVID came along, and I was sitting there going, I don't know, my book sales are sort of going down a bit. Maybe I should do something to promote it. YouTube. Yeah. I've got all these films from when I circumnavigated. I could start a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So this was just before COVID happened. It was just building up to that. So I went, fine. So I started a YouTube channel, and I put all these films on that. I did tiny bit of work to them, and put them all on this new YouTube channel called Sailing Gently. And in order to get a name for your channel on YouTube, you have to have 100 subscribers. And actually, that's just about the hardest part. So I went to this Doctor Who convention in Los Angeles called something or other, just before COVID happened. It was just happening. Stories of it were around. And did this convention, and a really nice guy. I said to one or two of the fans about my channel that I couldn't get to 100. And Jesse said to me in the bar over a beer, he said, Michael, I'm sure there are 2,000 American fans there. He said, Michael, I'm sure we American fans can get you up to 100 subscribers. He said, one day you'll have 20,000. I went, Jesse, if I can just get to 100, I'd be grateful. If I got to 1,000 and monetized, which means you actually get money for the adverts,
Yes.
I would be ecstatic. So Jesse was as good as his word. He contacted various other fans in the American fan thing, and I got up to having 100 fans, and I got a name, so I called it Sailing Gently. Then I went, well, maybe I should make some new videos. So when I went sailing in what was to me my brand new boat, I mean, it's 20 years old, this boat, but it was my new boat. I was going off to places. I got a load of not GoPros. I got £25 Chinese knockoff imitation GoPros, and thought, well, this is ridiculous. Clearly people are interested in sailing because people are visiting my channel, beside Doctor Who fans who've been paid by Jesse to do it. And I just started shooting stuff on my GoPros, on my little cams, and with one decent camera. And then I got editing stuff out, and I started editing it out. And that took me back. I really enjoyed the whole editing process. I really enjoyed sitting in front of my computer with two screens up and cutting all this material together. And I actually got to 1,000 subscribers, which absolutely amazed me. And the thing monetized. And I started earning $2.20 a month out of it. It was absolutely wonderful. I got attacked by pirates in the Gulf of Aden, by Somalian pirates. I was boarded and robbed by pirates. So I went, that's a good story. And I've actually earned more money out of magazine articles and interviews over that pirate story than the pirates stole from me. So I was ahead of the game with that. So I thought, hey, I'll put it on my channel and it will, it doesn't, I won't make any money out of it, but yeah, they'll enjoy it. So during COVID, I made my, I think it has got something like 250,000 views or something, this Attacked by
Amazing.
Pirates video.
Yeah.
So absolutely amazing. So then I did another video called The Atlantic Crossing Guide, which supported a book I've written called, oddly enough, called The Atlantic Crossing Guide. So I did a video about that, and that too has got 25,000, I can't remember the numbers. They're all ridiculous numbers. And it's enormously popular. At the moment, I've got thousands of people watching it because this is the season. This is the moment when all the boats sail across the Atlantic from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean. So there are something like 300 boats out there in the Atlantic, all heading towards me, having read my book, having seen my video.
That's great. Yeah.
And the channel, mainly because of those two French canal routes. I've been up and down the French canals, oh, I don't know, dozen, 15, 20 times. So I did a book. So I suddenly discovered the books about how you do the French canals or how you sail your boat from the UK to the Mediterranean without having to spend a night at sea. Books like that were really, videos like that were really interesting people, and the books along with them,
Yeah.
which do obviously go into far more detail, were selling very well indeed. And I mean, and I'm thrilled to say, this morning I got up and I looked at my phone to see what my website was doing, and I'm up to 17,500 odd subscribers on the site.
That's fantastic, Michael. That's great.
Incredible. Yeah. And that's only 2 years ago. I think it's 2 years ago that I really got serious about it and started
That's
doing
brilliant.
stuff.
You'll be up to 20,000 in no time. You will.
And I've actually, my life has come a full circle because at the beginning, in my childhood, I was there making little films on 8mm film, and some 60 or 70 years, 80 years later, I'm making little films on video cameras and editing them up, and people are watching them. That's what's so rewarding. I mean, yeah, I'll take the money, but people are actually watching them, and that's, you know, and the fact you watched it and enjoyed it makes me, Frank, it makes me feel really, really pleased and honored. I'm delighted.
Oh, it was really fascinating to me. Even though I don't know anything about boating, I've never sailing or anything like that. I've never been involved in that, but there was enough there for even a layman like me to enjoy, you know, which is great.
I must admit, a lot of people who, I get a surprising amount of comments these days from people who've never sailed and people who don't know anything about boats, but just like sea stories.
Yes, it's very much the stories and the photography of it, you know, that you intersperse with it is interesting. You know? So if anyone, any of you guys are interested by Michael's work there, I'll have the links in the description of this video below to Michael's YouTube channel and to how you can get the books if you are interested in that kind of thing. But for now, Michael, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
I must say, Frank, I approach these interviews with a bit, oh dear, same old, and you've actually managed to get stuff out of me that I've gone, I've not told that story in a million years, or I've never told that story.
I hope so.
So congratulations. Well done. I've
thank you.
enjoyed being interviewed by you. Thank you very much.
It's been wonderful speaking to you, Michael. Thank you so much. And we'll keep in touch, I hope. And I'm be very keen to see that how your YouTube channel blossoms. I got a feeling that you'll be up to 20,000 before too long, you know, 20,000 subscribers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is inevitable. Where it goes after that, I don't know, because I really niche sailing is a very niche subject. I think if I opened a Doctor Who YouTube channel, I might do better. But there are so many
Yeah.
people doing it much better than me. Anyway, it's really been a pleasure, Frank. I've enjoyed it enormously. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Michael. And thank you all for watching. And we'll be back soon with some more to celebrate 60 years of Doctor Who. I hope to see you then. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye. My library of digital sailing books is at gentlesailing.com, so you can buy them as instant downloads. There's a link to a printer who can convert them to hard copy if that's what you prefer. I've just totally updated and republished French Canal Routes to the Mediterranean, which is now in its 12th edition and is fully up to date with new information, charts and pictures. Recently I published Your Boat in the Sun, which proved an instant popular success. It's about where to keep your boat in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean and the costs and the logistics involved. I sold 50 copies on the very first day. The Atlantic Crossing Guide has become a bestseller, and it outsells most of the others, probably because it's arguably one of the most comprehensive guides to sailing to the Caribbean that's available. The Gentle Sailing Route to the Mediterranean is one of the most popular publications that I have. It describes how to coast hop all the way to Gibraltar without having to spend a night at sea. There are books about marinas in the Med, sailing in the Caribbean islands, as well as a book on simple navigation, and even a Pacific Ocean crossing guide, and a book about just living aboard a sailing boat. Anyway, it's all at gentlesailing.com. So please do pay the site a visit and browse through my publications if you have a moment. Thanks. Fair winds.